It started with a smirk. Representative Jasmine Crockett, seated behind the mic in a House Oversight Committee hearing, leaned forward with that razor-sharp calm she's known for. The chamber buzzed with routine formalities until she spoke. "You know," she said, barely above a whisper, "some folks enjoy a kind of paternity privilege." The room fell silent. No one moved, not the chairman, not the stenographer. Even the C-SPAN ticker seemed to pause in confusion. Then just a blink of hesitation, Crockett folded her hands, let the words sit heavy in the air, and didn't explain. She didn't have to. The internet would do that for her. Within minutes, clips of her remark were bouncing across Twitter like stray sparks in a dry field. Paternity privilege? Hashtags bloomed. TikTok lit up with reaction stitches, lip-syncing her line like a prophecy. Something unspoken had just been said, and it struck deep. In Florida, tucked inside the palatial walls of Mar-a-Lago, Melania Trump sat near the garden windows. The sun cut sharp lines across her cheekbones. Her eyes scanned a phone screen, her face unmoving, not cold, not shocked, just unreadable. That same First Lady stillness, but something was different this time. Because just hours earlier, a confidential medical document slipped to a freelance blogger through encrypted messages had made its way into the shadows of the digital underworld. A page. 2 signatures, a name, Barron William Trump, and a date beside it recent, far too recent. A DNA test. By midnight, speculation had turned into a storm. Cable news anchors danced around it, legal analysts avoided eye contact, but online. The question was everywhere. Why would a DNA test be needed for Barron? Who ordered it? Who doubted? Melania's silence became the eye of the hurricane. She didn't release a statement. She didn't refute or confirm. But insiders whispered that her security detail had doubled, that she canceled 2 appearances without explanation, that she hadn't spoken to Donald in days. And Jasmine, she posted a single tweet, just a clock emoji. One cryptic line had cracked the floor beneath the Trump family image and sent tremors through America's political theater. But no one was ready for Melania's reaction, not even her inner circle. For years, Donald Trump built more than a political movement, he built a dynasty. Not just with real estate and red hats, but with bloodlines. From campaign stages to gold-plated boardrooms, he sold an image. America's comeback king, flanked by heirs and loyalists, sealed behind marble and myth. But dynasties are delicate things. By the time Jasmine Crockett uttered her 5-second detonation, some folks enjoy a kind of paternity privilege. Trump's empire was already groaning under the weight of investigation, indictment, and erosion from within. Multiple trials loomed. Campaign funds were drying. The GOP was splintering into pre- and post-Trump factions. Allies were flipping back, then ghosting altogether. And behind the cameras, the family that once functioned like a reality show cast now felt more like contestants in a game none of them could win. Ivanka distanced. Don Jr. leaned in harder. Eric stayed the loyal echo. But Melania, she remained what she had always been, still, polished, untouchable. Until now. Because the moment the word Barron collided with Jasmine's whisper of genetic certainty, everything changed. This wasn't about Stormy Daniels or campaign violations. It wasn't about golf courses or Georgia phone calls. This was about blood. And in Trump's world, image is blood. Legacy is blood. The bloodline is the brand. If there's even a hint that the tower's foundation isn't what it seems, the entire skyline starts to sway. That's why Jasmine's comment landed like a bomb. Not because it confirmed anything, but because it threatened everything. With a smirk and a syllable, she turned a protected teen into a potential symbol of unraveling myth. And what made it cut deeper? She didn't scream, she didn't accuse. She simply asked a question that no one in power wants to answer. And suddenly, the Trump camp found itself on unfamiliar ground, not being attacked but being doubted. Because doubt, unlike scandal, lingers, it grows, it mutates, and worst of all, it invites people to imagine what might be true, not what's proven. Inside GOP war rooms, panic buzzed behind the scenes. Advisors debated strategy, deny it outright, attack Jasmine's character, blame the media, nothing stuck. Because Melania, the one person who could shut it all down, refused to speak. And silence in the Trump playbook isn't a page, it's a deviation. Donald was known for volume, Ivanka for curated charm, Don Jr. for fire, but Melania, she was a fortress, So when that fortress didn't defend the gate, the public noticed. Cable news filled the void with speculation. Social media flooded with theories. Journalists pressed former staffers. Everyone wanted to know. Was there a test? Who asked for it? And why now? Meanwhile, Jasmine's clip hit 10 million views. Commentators labeled her reckless. Others called her brilliant. But the common thread was unavoidable. She had flipped the table. She had changed the rules. She wasn't debating policy, she was piercing narrative. And for those watching the disenfranchised, the doubted, the voices told they didn't belong, Jasmine became something more than a politician. She became the antithesis of legacy, a disruptor who didn't need access, just audacity. Every dynasty fears the question that cracks its illusion. And Jasmine had just asked it calmly, confidently, unapologetically. And just when the Trump camp thought things couldn't unravel further, the silent one spoke. She was always the stillest one in the room. While cameras hunted Trump's every expression and the kids squabbled over screen time, Melania sat just outside the frame, composed, unreadable, strategic. A former model, yes, but more than that. She was a master of silence, and in politics, silence can be power. From the moment she stepped into the national spotlight, she resisted the scripts. She didn't embrace the role of devoted First Lady. She edited it. She didn't perform for approval. She performed precision. Her smiles were rationed. Her interviews, rare. Her trust, impossible to earn, but her image that she curated with military discipline. And at the center of that image was Barron. From his birth, he was kept behind velvet ropes. No staged hugs, no interviews, no public slip-ups. While Ivanka turned motherhood into brand strategy and Don Jr. turned loyalty into a personality, Melania turned motherhood into a fortress, not a trace of gossip, not a shadow of scandal, no birthdays televised, no speeches on the campaign trail. Just silence, loud and deliberate. Staffers who served in the East Wing whispered about a code. Barron was off limits. Any mention in a meeting, immediate shutdown, no jokes, no leaks. Even when the press pressed, she held the line. "He's a child," she'd say curtly. "He deserves peace." But silence doesn't come without consequence. Because in silence, narratives fester. And when Jasmine Crockett dropped her now infamous line, paternity privilege, the myth cracked. It wasn't just the insinuation that landed like thunder. It was the way it exposed how tightly Melania had wound the ropes. For years, she'd edited the public version of her family like a fashion shoot. Now someone had kicked the tripod. The contradiction was glaring. She wanted privacy, yet married a man addicted to spectacle. She demanded dignity, yet aligned herself with a brand built on chaos. She shielded Barron, yet never hesitated to appear in photo ops when the legacy demanded it. To many, it now looked less like protection and more like control. Reporters began revisiting archived footage. Moments where Melania would subtly redirect Barron away from microphones. Times she refused to let him join group interviews. Even small body language ticks the way she'd adjust his posture or whisper instructions during White House events. One former aide anonymously described it as icy mothering. Not cruel, not cold, but strategic. She didn't mother like a nurturer, they said. She mothered like a monarch. And maybe that's why the silence around the DNA rumors cut so deeply. Because for a woman so obsessed with controlling narrative, her refusal to squash this one raised alarms. The statement, "Barron is mine, that is all," didn't clarify, it commanded, like a queen issuing a decree without explanation. And in doing so, she left room for every theory to fester. Critics said she knew exactly what she was doing. That one-word dominance, mine, was not a defense. It was a claim, a brand stamp, a show of ownership, not maternal warmth, but jurisdiction. Others defended her, said she had every right to protect her son. That responding with emotion would have fed the frenzy. That silence in this case was the high ground. But even her defenders had to admit something felt off. Because while the world raged outside the gates of Mar-a-Lago, Melania didn't flinch. She didn't hold a press conference. She didn't hold Barron's hand. She didn't hold anything. She stood still. Her armor held. Until it didn't. Insiders close to the Trump orbit whispered of tension behind closed doors. Heated arguments in the residence. A canceled trip. Security requests filed without standard protocol. One rumor, unverified, but spreading like wildfire, claimed that a private document had gone missing from Melania's locked drawer. And through it all, she said nothing more. No denials, no interviews, no compassion offered to a nation obsessing over her son's identity. Because that's the thing about control. It works until the illusion cracks. And Jasmine Crockett had cracked it with just a sentence. Not with scandal, not with slander, but with doubt. The one thing control can't manage. So now, the woman who once managed to remain untouchable was under a microscope she couldn't smash. The mother who once controlled every whisper was now haunted by the one she couldn't silence. And slowly, carefully, the image Melania Trump had spent decades building, the icy protector, the elegant enigma, the untouchable first lady, began to falter. But beneath the designer armor, insiders say something broke, and it wasn't just trust. Before she ever held a mic in Congress, Jasmine Crockett held the line in Texas courtrooms no one wanted to walk into. Public defender. Black woman. Southern drawl wrapped around a sharp legal mind that could slice through indictments like wire through butter. She didn't wear pearl necklaces or speak in rehearsed political rhythms. She wore braids and grit and a face that didn't flinch even when the odds laughed in her face. Dallas made her, Texas shaped her, but it was injustice that lit the match. She wasn't supposed to win her first race for state representative. She had no big-name donors, no family political dynasty to lean on. What she had was truth. Uncompromising, confrontational, loud in a way that made the room uncomfortable. Truth. And when she got to the Texas House, she didn't sip the Kool-Aid. She spit it back with a line that would echo far beyond Austin. You don't get to use the Constitution to protect your bigotry. That was the moment progressives sat up. Then came the videos. The way she dissected Republican talking points like a surgeon, calm, confident, devastating. Her clapbacks weren't petty. They were precise, calculated, each word a scalpel that left arrogance exposed. One viral clip showed her holding up a bill and calmly asking, "Can you show me where in this text it says what you just claimed?" The author fumbled. Cameras rolled. The internet exploded. Memes crowned her queen of receipts. Then came Congress. When Jasmine Crockett arrived on the Hill, insiders smirked. A freshman with fire? Cute. But she didn't play the waiting game. In her first year, she torched misinformation in judiciary hearings, stood shoulder to shoulder with icons like Ayanna Pressley and Ilhan Omar, and pulled entire news cycles into her orbit with a single sentence. If you fear the truth, maybe power ain't your calling. She didn't posture, she prosecuted. And people listened not just because she was loud, but because she was right. People of color, immigrants, working-class families, they saw her as one of their own. Not perfect, not polished, but real. That rare politician who didn't need to fake passion because she was forged in it. And when chaos erupted around the Trump family, and whispers of scandal moved like smoke through the Capitol, Jasmine didn't stay quiet. She waited. She let the press speculate, let conservative pundits foam at the mouth, let Melania's silence echo like a vacuum. And then in a moment that would be replayed millions of times across every social platform, she leaned forward in a hearing and delivered a single phrase. Paternity privilege. No names, no direct accusations. Just a spark lit with surgical precision, timed for maximum impact, aimed at an empire built on silence and image control. Suddenly she was trending in 3 countries. News anchors tried to decode her meaning. Right-wing influencers spiraled. Gen Z creators turned her words into rallying cries. And still Jasmine didn't clarify. Because for her, the truth wasn't a PR stunt. It was a weapon, and she wielded it like someone who had nothing left to lose and everything left to protect. This was never just about Trump. It was about the machinery that silences women, that treats truth as threat, that protects power through secrecy. Jasmine was not playing their game. She was flipping the table. In her community, elders called her the voice we prayed for. Teens messaged her about speaking truth to their own families. Immigrants tweeted that finally, someone who looked like them was cutting through the noise. And all of that, all the praise, all the backlash, all the attention only sharpened her focus. Because Jasmine knew what was coming. She could feel it building in the air, thick as thunder before a storm. The public didn't know yet. The networks hadn't caught up, but she'd seen the intel. She'd heard the whispers from staffers on both sides. She knew there was a leak and it wasn't stopping. The truth was coming. And Jasmine Crockett, the girl who wasn't supposed to win, the defender turned congresswoman turned social firebrand, was ready to pull the pin. But what she dropped next wasn't just commentary. It was nuclear. The clip aired at 7:02 p.m. Eastern. Jasmine Crockett, seated across from a veteran political analyst, leaned into the camera during a panel discussion on dynasty politics. "Let's just say," she murmured with deliberate calm, "not everyone parading around the Trump name shares the same genetic certainty." The host blinked, the panel froze. For a moment, the silence felt longer than the segment itself. Social media didn't wait. Within 15 minutes, genetic certainty was trending worldwide. TikToks emerged with timelines, theories, digital sleuthing. Twitter erupted with screenshots and side-by-side photos. Instagram exploded with cryptic quotes, fan edits, and dramatized breakdowns. One post read simply, "You don't drop that unless you know something." MAGA influencers went into DEFCON 1. On Truth Social, a fringe commentator wrote, "This is the most vile and desperate smear campaign against a teenage boy in American history. Crockett should be stripped of her seat." Fox News broke into its regular programming with an emergency segment titled, "The Left's New Low." And yet Melania Trump said nothing. No statement, no tweet, no correction, just silence. That silence became fuel. Cable hosts dissected Jasmine's phrasing with forensic intensity. What did she mean? Was this just metaphor, or did she know something the public did? Meanwhile, Barron Trump, normally shielded from the public eye, was now the subject of global obsession. Every image, every clip, every glimpse of him walking across a White House lawn was being re-examined. A high school classmate anonymously claimed Barron once hinted at being different. A former Secret Service agent told a journalist that Melania had once shut down all cameras on a family trip without explanation. The speculation wasn't just personal, it was political. Because if there had been a DNA test, if the First Lady had, at any point, questioned paternity, it didn't just fracture a family. It fractured the mythology, the golden image, the dynasty brand. And inside Mar-a-Lago, panic took root. Sources close to the former president described him as furious and obsessed with who leaked what. Staff were grilled. Lawyers went into lockdown. Melania, according to insiders, remained calm, icy, controlled, but her team stopped returning calls, canceled her next 2 events, avoided all press. Journalists tried every angle, nothing leaked, no documents surfaced, no confirmation arrived. Which only made it worse. Because in the vacuum of certainty, the whisper became a wildfire. Even Trump's allies began treading lightly. A former campaign advisor on background admitted, "We're not touching that. If she's not shutting it down, maybe there's a reason." And Jasmine, she offered no clarifications, no walkbacks, just a follow-up tweet the next morning that read, "Truth never needs a press release." By day 3, the question wasn't whether the claim was true. It was, why won't they deny it? Barron's name, once carefully protected from headlines, now scrolled across every chyron. Teen influencers made videos defending him. Psychologists were booked on TV to analyze the potential trauma. Memes turned sinister. Threads turned personal. And still Melania remained silent. Until she didn't. Because in the early hours of a humid Friday morning, a reporter from a mid-tier digital outlet received a direct message. Unverified, no attribution, just 5 letters. Mind. No signature, no emoji, just that. The outlet published it anyway, under the headline, "Melania silence in one-word text." And the internet exploded. Was it confirmation, denial, defiance? Was it meant for the public or for Donald? Was it scripted, emotional, pre-planned, a signal, a warning? And if she said, "Mine," was that love? Or was that war? And then without warning, a quote from Melania surfaces. 1 word, 5 letters, and it sends everyone spiraling. The official statement came at 9:34 a.m. No press conference, no spokesperson, no television address, just a stark white background on Melania Trump's personal Twitter account. "Barron is mine, that is all." 9 words, 3 periods, 0 room for interpretation, and yet it ignited more questions than it answered. Within 2 minutes, it had 600,000 views. In 10, #Barron is mine was trending globally. And by lunch, it was no longer a statement, it was a battlefield. Right-wing pundits declared it a mother's roar, a masterclass in restraint and resolve. "She's protecting her child," said one. "She's done playing nice," claimed another. But the tone was what set social media on fire. It wasn't maternal, it wasn't warm, it was clipped, cold, and unmistakably surgical. The internet latched onto the punctuation, those full stops, as if each sentence was a bullet. "She's not reassuring the public," wrote one progressive commentator. "She's asserting ownership." And ownership in this context was complicated. Feminists split. Some saw a mother reclaiming her space. Others saw a woman towing the same line of control the Trump brand was infamous for. Late-night comedians joked. She sounded more like a lawyer submitting evidence than a mom defending her son. Still, it worked. It cut the oxygen from the fire Jasmine Crockett had lit. For a moment, because behind the scenes, journalists were still chasing the leak, still hunting for a medical file, a whisper, anything to confirm whether there was ever a test at all. Trump insiders were spinning fast. Barron's digital history was being scrubbed. Requests for comment were met with a firm, "No further statement at this time." But Jasmine, she was just getting started. At 7:12 p.m., she went live. No press team, no curated soundstage. Just her in a simple t-shirt, hoop earrings, standing in front of a plain white wall with the caption, "We need to talk." Her IG live shot passed 50,000 viewers in under a minute. "I wasn't going to say anything more," she began. "But I see now how power works when it's challenged. I see how quickly the narrative shifts when a woman of color raises a question." She looked straight into the camera. "I said what I said, and the reaction told me everything I needed to know." Viewers were locked in. "This isn't about Barron," she said. "This is about a system that treats some families like royalty and others like pawns. You want to talk about trauma? Let's talk about black and brown children dragged through headlines without mercy. Let's talk about how the right cries privacy when it's their own, but publishes mugshots of 13-year-olds when it's not." The comments section exploded. Fire emojis, fist emojis, preach. "This isn't about Melania," she continued. "It's about dynasty manipulation, about how image is curated, weaponized, protected while truth is buried beneath layers of privilege." And then she paused. For a full 5 seconds, she said nothing, just stared, letting the silence hang like a verdict. "Barron is mine," that's what she said. "And you know what? Cool, say less. Because when you fight for power like it's property, that's not love, that's control." The chat went nuclear. "She's not saying it's not true. She's saying he belongs to her." Chills. She's dragging everyone without even raising her voice. And then Jasmine dropped the line that would echo across media for days. "If it takes a single question from someone like me to shake an entire empire, maybe it was never built on truth to begin with." Boom. That sentence clipped, calm, devastating would be quoted, clipped, captioned, remixed into protest songs, tattooed in digital ink. In minutes, her live surpassed 2 million views. Cable networks scrambled. CNN analysts debated whether Crockett had crossed a line or exposed one. Fox News called it performative insurrection. MSNBC aired it in full. And still, Jasmine wasn't done. She ended her stream with this: "I'm not scared of silence. I'm scared of systems, and if the truth offends you, it means it's finally close enough to sting." The final frame froze on her face, fierce, unapologetic, undeniably in control. Back in Mar-a-Lago, aides reportedly urged Melania to release a follow-up. To clarify, expand, humanize, she declined. The original post stayed pinned. But among insiders, the cracks were visible. A former East Wing staffer told Politico, "That statement wasn't damage control, it was message control. Melania doesn't do emotion, she does signal." And that signal, "Barron is mine," landed differently now. Not as comfort, as a warning. As if she were drawing a line in glass, daring the world to tap again. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett had stepped off the battlefield and onto the balcony of public opinion, not as a congresswoman caught in controversy, but as a truth warrior rising into myth. But what Jasmine says next makes even her allies gasp and shifts public sympathy forever. By dawn, it was everywhere. Justice for Barron wasn't just trending, it was exploding. TikTokers cried into ring lights, whispering sympathy through lip-quivered edits. YouTubers dropped hour-long timelines of the Crockett-Melania moment, complete with mood music and grainy zoom-ins. Teen influencers who once stayed out of politics were now making 90-second explainer rants to their millions of followers. And Jasmine Crockett, she had become an archetype. The IG Live had crossed 40 million views in under 24 hours. Screenshots of her closing quote, "When truth offends you, it means it's finally close enough to sting," were printed on t-shirts, tote bags, coffee mugs. Protest artists painted murals overnight. Editorials in Teen Vogue and The Atlantic both ran with headlines like, "The Woman Who Shook the Bloodline." But it wasn't just progressive circles reacting. Late-night hosts went off-script. On The Daily Truth, a comedian known more for sarcasm than sincerity paused mid-monologue. He looked at the camera, glassy-eyed. "I don't care what side you're on," he said. "I see a boy being weaponized by silence, and a woman who dared to ask a question is being crucified for it." The studio audience didn't laugh. They applauded, slowly, like something sacred had just been acknowledged. Meanwhile, former Trump insiders began leaking. One ex-communications aide admitted that the Barron situation had been internally volatile for months. A former staffer from Melania's East Wing told a reporter off-record, "She never let anyone speak about him, ever. That silence was rule number one." Now the rule was broken, and the empire was scrambling to rewrite its own myth. Fox News launched a full-throttle defense campaign. Guests claimed Crockett had violated sacred family boundaries. One host called it the left's ugliest smear since birtherism, an ironic accusation not lost on Black Twitter. And Black Twitter, it was a firestorm. Users pulled up old footage of Melania promoting "Be Best," juxtaposed with her current silence. Others reminded everyone how Sasha and Malia Obama were dissected by the press as children, and no one in the GOP said a word. "Y'all mad about a question," one tweet said. "We watched y'all call a 10-year-old ghetto for wearing braids." The double standard wasn't just clear, it was loud. Then celebrities weighed in. A Grammy-winning pop star posted a black square with one word, "Barron." An A-list actress quote-tweeted Jasmine's speech with a caption, "Say it louder for the dynasties in the back." A retired NBA legend shared a clip from the IG Live with the hashtag, "Truth Hurts." But not all the takes were celebratory. Some liberals feared the conversation was spiraling into dangerous territory. That public speculation about paternity, even if never confirmed, could psychologically scar a teenager. And others pushed back on the viral momentum. "If we care about Barron's humanity, maybe don't turn his trauma into TikToks." The cultural moment was caught between reverence and reckoning, and Jasmine Crockett was standing right in the eye of the storm. She issued no apology, no clarification, just one more post. A screenshot of the Justice for Barron hashtag, overlaid with the words, "Silence isn't protection, it's participation." It went viral instantly. Even educational platforms got involved. High school teachers reported students using the Crockett-Melania standoff as a launchpad for debates on privacy, power, and political families. One civics teacher posted, "Never seen kids this awake. We talked about legacy, image, and who gets to be a real American." Universities hosted emergency panels. Conservative think tanks issued statements accusing woke mobs of trying to dismantle American family values. Progressive scholars clapped back, calling it a long-overdue examination of dynastic impunity. And at the center of it all was a silence colder than the noise surrounding it. Because while America screamed and tweeted and reacted, Melania Trump said nothing. Not one word beyond, "Barron is mine." Not one video, not one clarification. The post remained, pinned, pristine, like a statue daring the world to blink. And Donald Trump, missing no speech, no rally, no interview, just golf course sightings and silent motorcades. People noticed. They weren't just asking, "What is the truth?" They were asking, "Why isn't he defending his own son?" The silence was no longer noble, it was suspicious. And in that vacuum, speculation became scripture, truth became theater, and a mother's icy mic drop birthed a movement. And yet through the storm, one group remained utterly silent. This was never just about one boy, one tweet, or one woman in designer heels. This was about us. Because beneath the hashtags, headlines, and viral clips, America wasn't just watching a family fracture, it was watching its reflection crack. When Jasmine Crockett dropped her now famous line, she didn't just shake the room, she held up a mirror. A mirror to a country that claims to value truth, but punishes those who speak it. A nation that demands transparency from the powerless and privacy for the privileged. Melania Trump's silence wasn't just strategic, it was symbolic. It reminded America of every institution that responds to questions not with answers, but with walls. Every powerful figure who believes that image is immune to inquiry, that legacy should shield them from scrutiny. And Jasmine, she didn't rise because she was polished. She rose because she broke the script. She didn't ask for permission to challenge a narrative curated by decades of dynasty branding. She didn't wait for the perfect moment or the most comfortable way to speak. She just did. And in doing so, she did what so many Americans, immigrants, workers, marginalized communities have done for generations. She risked being misunderstood, misquoted, maligned, to tell the truth anyway. That courage struck a chord. Not because it was loud, but because it was honest. Not because it was flawless, but because it was human. And as the scandal turned into a movement, and the movement into a conversation, something deeper began to shift. People started asking, who gets to write their story without interruption? Who gets the benefit of the doubt and who gets dissected at birth? The truth is, this was never just about Barron. It was about the boundaries of power and what happens when someone outside the gates dares to knock. It was about the immigrant child, whose parentage is questioned at every border. About the black teenager whose silence is read as guilt. About the trans kid whose identity is treated like a debate. It was about every person who's ever had to prove they belong while others are simply assumed to. In Jasmine's voice, millions heard their own. And for once, that voice wasn't filtered, rebranded, or softened to survive. It was raw, it was risky, and it was real. This wasn't a scandal, it was a signal that the era of curated truth is dying. That questions, even uncomfortable ones, are not crimes. That power, when built on silence, will always be fragile. And for every viewer who paused mid-scroll, every student who spoke up in class, every mother who saw a little of herself in Jasmine's fire, this moment became more than news. It became permission. Permission to question. Permission to speak. Permission to matter not in spite of your truth, but because of it. So yes, Jasmine Crockett made people uncomfortable. But comfort has never changed a country. Truth has. Courage has. Dignity has. And maybe that's the real story here. Not the DNA. Not the dynasty. But the dignity of one woman standing in the storm and saying, "I'm not afraid of your silence." And as Jasmine Crockett walked out of that studio, one question echoed louder than the scandal. So there it was. A single sentence from Melania Trump, "Barron is mine, that is all." Spoken like a final note in a song still echoing across the country. But instead of bringing clarity, it cracked the surface even further. It didn't end the conversation. It multiplied it. Millions of Americans weren't asking if Jasmine Crockett had gone too far. They were asking why a question so simple could rattle a legacy so carefully protected. This wasn't just drama, it was a reckoning. A reckoning about who gets questioned and who gets crowned. Who's protected by silence and who gets punished by it. In Jasmine's words, a generation heard permission to stop whispering and start confronting. And whether you agree with her or not, you can't ignore the courage it took to strike at the heart of power, with nothing but the truth and her own voice. So now we turn to you. What do you believe this moment revealed? Was it justice? Was it manipulation? Was it the truth peeking through the armor? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Start the conversation your feed's too afraid to touch. And if you felt even a flicker of power in this story, if you saw yourself in Jasmine or in the questions no one wants to ask, then share this video. Subscribe, speak up, stay loud. Because silence protects power. But truth protects us.